Hey everybody, it's me, Albatross. I wanted to say one thing before I began where we left off. It might feel like that, at least until we get to Deuteronomy, that I'm kind of jumping back and forth, and I really do apologize for that. I'll explain why. Like, I've read all these books and, like, made notes on them months ago. In fact, truth be told, I'm all the way to book Job right now as far as note taking is concerned. Well, unfortunately, when it comes to from Genesis to Deuteronomy, those notes that I took, and all my notes are handwritten. I have reasons for them to be handwritten. But the ones from Genesis to Deuteronomy, I accidentally left outside in the rain and they got ruined. So I'm kind of going off memory and everything for these first 5 books. Don't worry, I read them enough to know what's going on. So I do know what's going on. I just wish I had my notes so it was more orderly and organized. But, it is what it is. It happened. Why don't I type the notes? Well, reason being, it's because of the AI. I don't trust that AI is going to give me unbiased search results if it knows everything that I'm typing and saying. Like, I want my research to be as unbiased as possible, and it's hard to do that because AI is super manipulative like that, especially when the fact that they can go through all your files and stuff. So I've been handwriting all this stuff. I know, I'm not saying it's logical, maybe I'm wrong, but I want it to be as unbiased as possible. And even though I may sound biased when I talk about it, I'm just biased towards humanity. Forgive me. But I am. Okay. So, now, when we left off, the Israelites are all camped at the foot of Mount Sinai. And obviously Yahweh's on the top of Mount Sinai. There's this whole thing where Moses and Aaron are like the only ones allowed to go up there. But even they can't go up there as long as the cloud is up there. Once the cloud lifts off the top of the mountain, then Moses and Aaron only are allowed to go up the mountain. So, and we already went through the whole golden calf. Moses went up there the first time, did the 10 commandments. And in the meantime, Aaron and the people down below made a gold calf and all that. We already talked about all that. Now, the book of Leviticus is a crap ton of rules. And a lot of these rules are very interesting because they're like rules about like quarantining people who are sick, food that would be considered clean and unclean. We already talked about the yeast issue. I think I mentioned in one of my other videos that if you look up animals in yeast, you will find that there are many reptiles who, like, they can eat stuff with yeast, but it causes a lot of discomfort, like, and gas and stuff in reptiles. And not only that, like, if they eat like too much yeast, it could really hurt them. So it's not good for reptiles. It does not go well with their digestive tracts and system. So it's a little convenient that whenever it comes to these big meals, elaborate meals that Yahweh wanted to be fed, that was like the biggest rule, was like no yeast in the grain. So, interesting, right? I've talked about that many times, though. I believe that has, I believe that's a big clue. In my opinion, I believe that's a big clue as to what kind of biological entity who is eating this stuff is. And then obviously there's a lot of talk about punishments for sins and things like that. I'd like to read Leviticus 20 because they bring up another god that others worship or sacrifice to. And it sounds... Okay, let me read it. Okay, so Leviticus 20, verse 3. I myself will set my face against him and will cut him off from his people. For by sacrificing his children to Moloch, He has defiled my sanctuary and profaned my holy name. All right. Now, this is a very interesting name, Molech. Very interesting. And I'm sure there's many people who talk about it. I'm going off memory here, but I do know that there is a group of indigenous people in northern Iraq called the Yazidi, and their main god is named Moloch Taus. I don't know if this is the same Moloch or not. I don't know. But the Yazidi, from what I can understand and ascertain, they don't sacrifice children or anything, from what it sounds like, to this Molech. I could be wrong. I mean, it does look like they give some kind of tribute or something to that shrine where him and his 7 angels are. So, I mean, I don't know their full history. They kind of keep all that close to the chest. They're an indigenous people. But, like, from what I can ascertain about them, no, they don't sacrifice children to this Molech. But a lot of people have confused this god that they worship with Satan, because this Moloch that they worship is associated, like, with snakes. Snakes are very sacred to this indigenous group. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons why people have misunderstood and believe that they worship Satan. I don't believe that is true at all. I believe... Okay, let me tell you what I believe, and maybe this will help people understand where I'm coming from. And I could be wrong. Please, I'm no contactee. I'm no scholar. So I'm just going off from what I have learned. So I could be totally wrong. But it seems to me that there is, like, a larger group of extraterrestrial entities. Some good, some bad. Some neutral, maybe. So... And it does seem like there's some conflicting agendas going on here. And who can say which came first? I don't know. I can't answer that. But, like, I go off my own personal convictions, right? And personally, I don't see how anything that is depriving a group of people food, water, their home, is good. Especially, like, when you look at the original promise they were given in Egypt, and then you look at what actually happened. When you compare the two, right? Like, they were promised in Egypt the promised land and this and that. But they didn't know at the time that they themselves would never ever get to see it. They would live the rest of their lives struggling for every bit of clean water and food that they got. Wishing that they could go back to Egypt. While their children, the next generation, who don't even know anything other than living in the desert and eating that manna, don't remember what they had in Egypt. Maybe they weren't even told. Who knows? But they grow up in this harsh life. Then after all the previous generation is gone, the ones who originally promised all these false promises, then guess what we find out? This land that Yahweh is giving them, they have to take by force. Like, it wasn't as simple as just crossing the Red Sea and getting there. No. Yahweh had this plan the whole time. He knew they would be stuck in the desert. He uses some bullcrap excuse, whether it be the water they were asking for or the meat they were asking for. He used some bullcrap excuse to say that, no, now you get to stay here until the next generation is old enough to see the promised land. So I'm just saying, like, would they have left at all if they known what was going to transpire? I don't know. But they didn't know all this because this was not the original promise. This was not the original promise. And they never even got to live long enough to see that the promised land was never theirs. They would have to take it by force, via genocide, via war. They would have to take it. And this was Yahweh's plan the whole time. He even said to Abraham earlier that, no, you're not going to take this land now because these people are not grown enough into their evil. I really want them to grow and be prosperous for you to come in here and totally take them down. Because he loves a prosperous nation to bring down to its knees. That's what I'm gathering. Because he ends up doing it to the Israelites later. Spoiler alert, he does it to like every kingdom that becomes prosperous. But, so I'm just saying, there's obviously something going on here that they're not being told, that they were never told, that we aren't being told. And it looks a lot like MK Ultra to me. You know, I explained it in my last video. But this Moloch guy is very interesting. It's like, he comes up again and again. Him and Baal. I don't know if they're the same entities or not. I don't think they are. If I had to guess, Baal might be Ninorta or Nebu or Nana or one of the other Anunnakis. But, and then Satan's another one. Like, sometimes they use different names. Sometimes it's the same one. It's really hard to tell, but like, it is a group of people, I'm sorry, not people, a group of ETs playing with humans. They're literally playing with them. They think this is funny. They think it's funny. Like, we're not their species, obviously. Like, to them, we're like the cattle and the livestock that, like, we can get shot in the head. It won't make any difference to them. They view us the same as we view our cattle and chickens and whatnot. Like, and I'm not saying we're dumb like cattle or chicken. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're not their species. They are not from here. They come here to colonize, make us colonize ourselves, takes the work off their hands. It's a brilliant plan. They barely even have to lift a finger because they've convinced us to do their dirty work for them. It's brilliant. But anyways, hold on. Before I finish with Leviticus, there's a couple other things I would like to share. Now, if you look in Leviticus 26, verses 1 to 13, it explains all the rewards that the Israels will get as long as they obey all these commands and covenants, slaughter the appropriate livestock and, burn the right incense and don't worship any other god or make an image of Yahweh's face in any way. As long as they follow all these rules, and there's many, that they will be blessed, they will live in safety, they will prosper, people will look up to them. It'll be nothing but good, 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 good. But you see, they've all got to, obey. But they must all obey. And that if they do that, they obey, then, every enemy they have will be slaughtered pretty much, easily. You're really summing it up, but, you have to read it for yourself. But, it's, a couple other rewards, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and I will walk among you and be your God, and you will be my people. Because I am the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. So you will no longer be slaves to the Egyptians, but you can be slaves to me instead. Okay, so now, same chapter, Leviticus 26, but verses 14, to 46, it's 5 times longer than the rewards, is the punishment section. It's 5 times longer. Oh, Jesus. And there are many, many different punishments. He goes on and on and on. He really puts the fear of God. So yeah, first of all, what will happen if they disobey? Well, we see in verse 16, if they disobey, verse 16, then I will do this to you. I will bring on you sudden terror, wasting diseases, and fever that will destroy your sight and sap your strength. You will plant seed in vain because your enemies will eat it. I will set my face against you so that you will be defeated by your enemies. Those who hate you will rule over you, and you will flee even when no one is pursuing you. And he just goes on and on and on. On and on and on. He'll split them up, multiply their afflictions 7 times over. 7 times more than what their sins actually deserve. Oh, you don't believe that? Leviticus 26, verse 21. If you remain hostile toward me and refuse to listen to me, I will multiply your afflictions 7 times over as your sins deserve. So, like, they have no choice, is what he is saying. They have to do these things, these rituals, this incense burning, these festivals, these weird, grotesque rituals. They have no choice. Like, there's no choice. Like, they can't just say, no, I don't want to do that. No, they have no choice, is what he is telling them. And, like, he says that if they disobey him, he's going to bring them so low, so down and low, that they are just so desperate that they have no choice but to come back to him. That's what I'm getting from it. Like, why would you want people to follow you if you have to threaten punishment like this? You know what I mean? It's like, why do you want someone who really doesn't want you that bad? Because in order to, like, yeah, it sounds like a very abusive relationship forming to me. A very one-way abusive relationship. And this is all taking root. And, like, Leviticus, like, totally lays out all these rules. Like I said, I'm not going to go through every little rule in detail because, I mean, plenty of others do that. And the rules themselves aren't really the point, in my opinion. I think my opinion is it's the control that he is trying to exert. Keeping in mind, this is the first generation. So the first generation are the ones that you really want to traumatize and break, right? And then once their, like, spirits are totally broken, that's when the program moves to the second generation. But first, you got to break the first generation so that there's no question about what will come. And, you know, listen, I grew up in church, guys. So I've heard it all. I've heard every excuse, every explanation of the Bible. And in my opinion, none of them satisfy me. I mean, maybe they would if you were talking about, like, an actual, like, human ruler doing these things. Yeah, that would kind of make sense because, you know, humans can be very egotistical, have very fragile egos and stuff. But we're not talking about a human here. We are talking about, quote, God with such a fragile ego that it's not that, like, his ego is so fragile that they can't just simply choose to respectfully decline, right? They can't choose that. Like, he's giving them no choice, even though we're supposed to believe this is all about free will. If it was really about free will, like I said, they wouldn't have left Egypt. They said many times they didn't want to leave. Or insistent that they didn't want to leave. Every chance they get, they bring up the fact that they didn't want to leave Egypt. And I'm not even reading out of, like, I am reading out of the NIV version, right? There are other versions that are way more accurate who describe way more dark things than this. But I'm choosing to read the NIV because this is the Bible everyone uses, the Bible everyone's brainwashed to believe is the only Bible, the one true Bible. Because I don't need the closer version to show how wrong this is. Even with all the sugarcoating this Bible has. It has so much sugarcoating and rosy colored glasses. Even with that, the evil is plain as can be. I would like to point out one thing, though. When you read the NIV version, anytime you read a verse that uses the word awesome, that word in reference to God, because the Bible says it many times, God is awesome, awesome God, awesome works of God, etc., etc. When you look at the closer, older versions, the older translations, you find that the definition of awesome isn't a positive definition. It actually means, like, scary or terrifying. That's what they meant when they said awesome. So, you know, it's hard. It becomes even harder to explain all this when you actually look at the primitive meanings of these words. It just gets darker and darker. Like, Like I said, I've talked about in like older videos I've done on this channel about how the word repentance and the word righteousness meant totally different things back then. Like, when you look at these primitive, like, root words and stuff and what their original meanings are, it's describing a very dark, controlling entity that is speaking here to Moses and the Israelites. And I'm not blaming Moses or the Israelites. In fact, I believe Moses was manipulated. I don't think he knew the full version of events. And I think that's why he got mad. Because, yeah, that this happens... They explain it in like Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, the same story over and over. But it's right before Moses dies, before his tenure is over. Once again, the Israelites are thirsty. They're out of water. Okay? This is like another time. A whole separate time where they need water. Because they're in a desert. It's not like water is readily available. And Yahweh, I guess, is a reptile. I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't need water as much as humans do. I don't know what his reason was for totally depriving them of their bodily needs. I don't know. But he did. It was bad enough that Moses himself, the biggest excuser and apologist of Yahweh, got mad and had enough. Even he got to the point, he's like, why would you bring all these people out here to do this to them? He is saying it at this point. Moses. And Aaron is also quite ticked off. I mean, they all are. Their people are dying. Like, they're not soulless monsters, Moses and Aaron. I mean, like, they're humans too. At least they had been. I mean, I'm assuming they're humans. But either way, whether they're humans or not, they clearly have empathy for the Israelites. That they're thirsty. They need water. The children are usually like the first to die in those situations without water and food. Because they don't even know to reserve their strength. They don't... Anyway, it's dark. I'm not going to get into that. But anyways, Moses and Aaron are seeing all this. So they confront Yahweh. And they're like, well, something's got to change here. They need water. So Yahweh gives them instructions. Because he says for Aaron to take his staff. And what does he say? Well, I don't remember what Aaron was specifically meant to do. But it was supposed to be Aaron. Well, Moses and Aaron are fed up. Aaron doesn't move. Moses takes the staff. So he definitely, ignored Yahweh on that part. Where it was supposed to be Aaron. Moses takes the staff. And instead of doing exactly what Yahweh says to do, Moses is angry and he just starts hitting the rock with his staff. He hits it twice and then the water comes out of it. Now, Yahweh didn't like that. Because they didn't follow his instruction word for word. He didn't like that they were angry. He didn't like that they were standing up for their people who were vulnerable. Yahweh didn't like any of that. So, Aaron, the first one to die, takes him up, I think Mount Horeb, I don't know, one of the mountains, takes Aaron there, and he dies. Now, what I think is interesting is where Moses dies. Moses is taken up Mount Nebo. Now, or Nebu, but it's odd, right? Because there is an Anunnaki with that name. Who is Nebu? That's Marduk's son. If you know anything about Anunnaki in the Sumerian mythology, Nebu is the son of Marduk. Which I thought was very interesting. It's very interesting. And why is this so interesting? Where Moses dies. Well, this is interesting because if you skip ahead to the second to the last book of the Bible, book of Jude, Jude talks about Moses' body and that there was a fight that took place. In fact, hold on, let me pull up the exact. Okay, so I'm in the book of Jude. The book of Jude, I think it only has one chapter. Yeah, it only has one chapter. All right, book of Jude, let's start with verse 8. In the very same way, on the strength of their dreams, these ungodly people pollute their own bodies, reject authority, and heap abuse on celestial beings. But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not himself dare to condemn him for slander, but instead said, "The Lord rebuke you." So, they don't actually go into any more detail than that. Jude was kind of using that as an example to explain something else. But I find that interesting because the Michael Archangel, we learned that most of the time while these Israelites are in the desert, Yahweh goes ahead of them to the land of Canaan to create discord and stuff, to basically soften them up for an invasion. So we do know that it's one of Yahweh's angels that stay behind in the desert. Now, I'm not saying that this proves that was Michael. Maybe there was multiple ones in Sinai with them at the time. Assuming Michael was there. When Moses dies, though, Michael was there. And the devil was there. Now, I assume, and like I said, I don't know this for sure, but I'm assuming when the Bible talks about the devil, they're either talking about Marduk or Ea. Probably Marduk, because I think Ea's been long, long gone at this point, like since the flood. So most likely Marduk and Michael. And who would Michael be? Maybe Nenorta? I don't know. But they had a fight over the body. Why were they fighting over his body? What good is a dead body to either of these two celestial beings? These are like questions you gotta like ask. Like, did Moses die because of punishment? Or did he die because they needed his body for some reason? His genetics, maybe. I don't know. It's interesting though. Like, what? So, anyways, so clearly there's two agendas happening here, or a power struggle at the very least among these extraterrestrials. I don't know, but it's interesting. It's very interesting. But anyways, because Moses and Aaron disobey, blah, 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 they can't see the promised land, they'll die and all this. They even have an appointed time. So when Moses knows it's his time to die, he goes up Mount Nebu, dies. Michael and the devil fight over his body. Maybe if it's Mount Nebu, maybe the devil is Marduk's son in this case. Maybe it's Nebu fighting over the body. I don't know. I'm just speculating. That's just wild speculation. So let me shut up about that. Okay, so as far as Leviticus, I think we're good on Leviticus because I really want to go into detail in the book of Numbers, because the book of Numbers kind of lays it out more clearly, the events that took place in the desert and also the events that took place once they finally started heading north to Canaan. So it really lays it all out good. So I'll be back. I don't know when. It might be a week, it might be a day. Depends on when I have time to come back. But I really want to take my time with the book of Numbers because it really gives the best foundation possible for every single book after. It's like the foundation, if you will. And also, it explains certain things that, in my opinion, no priest, pastor, otherwise can just, argue away. Talks about sex trafficking, it talks about slavery, it talks about genocide, it talks about all the things. All the things. And I know a lot of people like to say that, well, they were sacrificing their children. Well, yeah, so were the Israelites. So let's not pretend like that's why they were doing it. They weren't. They didn't give a crap about them performing human sacrifice. They didn't give a crap about that. They did that. They did that. And I'm not saying it was right for either of them. I'm simply saying that that is not a good enough excuse in my mind for the judgment of all these people at the hands of the Israelites. It's not. It's a weak-ass excuse because the Israelites themselves were performing human sacrifices. It says it multiple times. Multiple times. And that's in the NIV version. Okay, so anyways, I hope you all have a good day. And like I said in my last video, I am not an atheist. I believe in God. I very much believe in God. I believe that the Old Testament is an infiltration. It's a devil in disguise, okay? It's not the real God. It's a devil disguising itself as the real God. It has nothing but hate. This is not what Jesus talks about later. No, we haven't gotten to Jesus yet, but we will eventually. And Jesus basically teaches the opposite of all this, so. But you'll see. I'll be back, and then we'll get into the book of Numbers. Stay tuned.